So our tradition is start around 2 minutes after the hour, and seeing as it is now 12:02. I think we can get started. So this is going to be, I think, an unusually well-planned and coordinated NCRN webinar where we have three distinct speakers from different organizations who'll be sharing their perspectives on the same topic of job postings as research data. How can we make better use of job postings as research data? Should we be using them at all? If we do decide to use them, how can we access them as researchers? And we have different speakers who will speak to different aspects of this topic. We're going to go in. Well, the order we're going to be going in is first we'll have Jeff Stroll from Georgetown University Center for Education and the Workforce. Will tell us about some of his center's research using job postings data and the good, the bad, and the ugly that they've experienced as they've done so. Then we'll go to Paul Daniels from the National Association of State Workforce Agencies and the NLS Research Hub. Will walk us through as researchers how practically can we get started on a research project that involves job postings data. He'll tell us about the Research Hub, which is a repository of just a staggering number, millions and millions of job postings that are contributed by state workforce agencies to the central repository that a lot of NCRN members are already using in research projects. And then we will have Peter Norlander, another researcher from Loyola University Chicago. He's an associate professor there. He developed I think it's an open source software program called the Job Ads Analysis Tool. So tell us a little bit about that and tell us about his experience as a researcher using job ads for academic research. So each panelist will have about 15 minutes, give or take. I'll try not to interrupt unless anybody goes really over that mark. And then we'll come back together, take some Q&A. So feel free to plop your questions in the chat. And then I'll try to moderate and call on folks based on what I see in the chat and hopefully have a robust discussion afterwards. And we'll then try to wrap up on time around 1 o'clock for y'all. So, Jeff, you want to go first?
Yeah, great. Thank you all for having me. I'm actually pretty excited about this. I've been working with job ads since around 2011 or 12, and then pretty exhaustively through about 2015, 16. I have not been using them as much analytically since that point. So a lot of what I'm going to present is old. But as you'll see, the same questions persist that came up through our work. So a lot of what I'm going to present are questions that I think that we should be asking. So let me find my slide deck. Hope that's it. Share. Yeah, there we go. And start from the beginning. Come on. Okay. There we go. I don't know why it didn't start there. Okay, the making of sausage. Bismarck warned us to stay away from asking and looking at how the sausage is made. Upton Sinclair wrote a great book called The Jungle that sort of gave us an idea about some stuff that falls into the sausage. The new sausage today is the use of job ads as real-time LMI, but people are not asking what is in the sausage, and this is to our detriment. I think we really need to be skeptical, and as I'll show you, it's an embarrassment that our 2014 report is probably one of the last pieces or one of the few pieces that's out there that actually asks a bunch of questions. And here we are wholesale just accepting skills information from job ads as the holy truth. I mean, I think is an embarrassment for us. Oops, sorry about that. A great quote from Joseph Kennedy's Guide to Econometrics. We're keen on amassing statistics. We collect them, add them, raise them to the nth power, take the cube root and prepare wonderful diagrams. But what you must never forget is that every one of those figures comes in the first instance from the village watchman who just puts down what he damn pleases. So we need to think about this. What is the source that's creating job ads? So in the first iteration, when we think about job ads, what's happening, right? Most of us here have probably created a job ad. How accurate is that, right? Do you have to go through an HR process? Does it actually, are you just fishing? All right, these I think are very important questions. And then what we need to get to is, well, how meaningful is the information that is in an ad? And what degree does it actually reflect the shop floor? Or does it reflect HR and OFCCP type requirement. So how much information in an ad is actually reflective of what someone is looking for in a from a candidate, right? I think of the great quote on pornography. I don't know what it is, but I'll know it when I see it. Is this what's happening in the job process? So if that's the case, what role does the ad play and how accurate is the information that's coming from the person looking for a hire, right? So I think there's a lot of questions that we need to ask about the relationship between who posts, what they're posting, and what they end up hiring. I think we need to ask, there's a limited number of information in a job ad. So how much implicit knowledge is there to a particular occupation that isn't carried in an ad? What's the relationship between the ad and the actual hire? Right. So what we list as a skill, is that actually what's being hired? And does that actually have any good, solid relationship to time to productivity? I did a quick scan trying to find signal to noise research on job ads, and most stuff that I could find was actually from recruiters on how quickly you could fill, but little on time to productivity. Uh, do we actually know that there's a job behind the ad? I mean, how much harvesting is going on? This is a phenomenon that large firms do. Is they put out an ad, they get a whole bunch of things, and then they put them in the archive in case they need somebody. So how much of this is contaminating the information that we have? How much of this is internal candidates? Many of you have probably, had somebody you need to hire. HR process says, well, you can't actually hire them. So then you make an ad that is tailored appropriate to the person that you already want to hire so that you have a unicorn, right? This is going to contaminate our skills. You've got virtual work, which I think is going to become very important when we start to think about the geocoding of a job. So, are we talking about where a person is employed or where the task is being done, and how that, what is our concept of the skill, where is it being utilized? I think is going to become very important. Some ads linger after the hire, so how does that end up contaminating? Then we have to take this information and translate it into usable pieces of information and analysis, right? And so we've got abbreviations. I'll show you some ads. You were just, scattering of abbreviations. This whole idea of assigning a geography. If you think the best case is thinking about job tellers. If you see some of those ads, they'll have multiple listings across the state, but the standard procedure, as I understand it, is assign the centroid of the zip code to all of those positions, and so it gives us a misrepresentation of the geography. Thankfully, many of the vendors have moved away from trying to say that their data is accurate at the zip code. We've got duplications across multiple sources. Does that get counted? How do you get rid of it? We've got occupation and industry. So we're going to have a bunch of words, and you'll see a couple of ads I'm going to put up here. And that stuff has to get translated to analytic units, right? And so often, in the best case, we'll have a job title. There's about 18,000 job titles in what was the DOT, Dictionary of Occupational Titles. Occupations, what do we use? 300, right? So there's a translation problem that's going on. The same with industry. Oftentimes, I think they relate the employer name to the Dun and Bradstreet and then translate that to an industry code, but it's not necessarily going to be accurate in terms of what we're talking about, what we think of as industry. Education, how often is it there? When I was working with job ads, it was only about 40% of the time. The rest is imputed. I'm fine with that, but we need to know this stuff. We need to ask these questions, and they just haven't been asked. And so we also need to figure out how to find the wheat amongst the chaff. I'll show you a job ad later on. It has 901 words. I'd argue that only about 150 of those words in this ad relate to skills. So we really need to ask, if you have to have some machine learning language go through all of this and parse that, how well is it doing? And I have yet to see vendors publicize the error statistic, the noise statistics behind that translation process. And I was talking earlier, it's very eye-opening to ask a vendor to give you the raw ad and the parse data that you get from it so that you can do a comparison. Now, again, I worked on this a decade ago, And there was many cases of job ads being in a different state, and in some cases a different country than where it was derived from. These questions have to be asked, but they're not being asked and they're not being answered. And any other time you're doing a statistical analysis, you look at the standard error, you look at the noise. Why aren't we doing this with job ads? It drives me a little crazy. So, anyways, always ask what is in the sausage before you eat it. It's embarrassing that our 2014 report is one of the few that dissects job ads. Now, I've had good experience with vendors along the way, but we have to ask what their motivation is. And if they're a for-profit company, it's a profit motivation. So they are willing to sell you what you're willing to buy. And if you're not asking for error statistics, they're not going to give them to you. And then they used to be doing the zip code, right? But it's sort of, I haven't seen it as much, but we need to ask the same questions about skills. How accurate are they? What is being picked up in the translation? So you'll see these ads. And I think it's really important to be asking, are the skills posted what is being hired, right? And I have yet to see any good analysis that looks at the skills in a posting and compares them to the pile of rejected resumes versus the accepted resumes, as well as time to productivity to say, yes, there's a really great alignment between these skills as listed in the posting and these skills that are hired. And that leads to really good time to productivity and holding on to a worker, right? So does it actually get to a good job match? How many people are still employed 6 months out? Um, Now, I want to be clear, our work, and again, it's old, suggests that there is a good signal underlying the data. And this is one reason that I'm a proponent of using job ads. I just want us to be just more and more cautious about what the noise properties are, and we're not doing it. And I think BLS should really step up and take this on, because as far as I understand, job ads started as a public good, and then they've been switched over into the vendor world. And I would love to know what happened here, but it'd be great to have a neutral party get out there and say, okay, when you're doing that skill from a job ad, it is reliable 50% of the time, 80% of the time. And if you're going to look at 5 skills across a job ad and each of them has 80% reliability, do the math. You get some very quickly get to a combined error that's not going to be very high. So we need somebody to be telling us this so that we, at least know what we're dealing with, right? Get some transparency on these data. So now just to look at a job ad, these were pulled from Sunday's Washington Post. And so here's a job ad. So here, we've got a case, IT vendor risk analysis. This is where you bring up job title to SOC. So how accurate is that translation going to be? That's the first question. If you look through here, there's a bunch of, and I can share this with anybody. I don't want to actually read through this. You've got a lot of abbreviations that need to be translated. You need to review these. And if you think about, I don't know how many job ads there are a day, but if I recall correctly, we got about 5 million a month. Right. So this has got to be automated. It's going to be extremely difficult to come through back here and do some kind of quality control check, but it needs to be done to help train the machine learning to pick up all of the abbreviations. And this one isn't bad, right? And so, VW credit. What industry is that? You'd think it's finance, but maybe it's something else, right? Based on the titles, you have to have a reference point. Um, so just to move forward. So here we have an office assistant. Oops, here we had an office assistant. There we go. I mean, there's almost nothing here, right? Very, very little information. Doesn't even have a industry, a employer. I don't think it has a location. Location wasn't there. So how many ads out there in the world are like this, right? We don't have an answer to this, but we need to ask the question and try to get to an answer. And again, this is not a scientific query here. This was just going up to the post and pulling stuff down for this purpose. The next one is a senior buy analyst. I have no idea what a buy analyst is, who does market trends, develops international dashboard and work it. And so there's, as you can see, there's a whole bunch of abbreviations through here. So we need to think that yes, you could get an accurate translation of these abbreviations, but also the accuracy of that work needs to be aggregated up to a statistic that helps us. How well is that done and how meaningful is that aggregation? And you'll see in another ad some skills that looks good, but then how does it aggregate into a meaningful piece of information? Now, this job ad was one of the longer ones that I found on the Washington Post. So I didn't want to bias it towards these small ones. So this ad has 909 words. In this first section, there's 213. I would say zero are meaningful for any kind of skills, task, uh, or analytics that are going to get us to any LMI. But if you read through it, and I'll share this later so you can read through it, I would say that this particular paragraph actually could be parsed incorrectly to derive an awful lot of skill and task information when it's actually talking about the company itself. Taking a look at the salary range, you've got about 51,000 in the range. I'm not sure what we would do with that. We assert that it would be the median of that, at the middle of the range. I have no idea. So we need to be careful about the movement towards salary information from these ads. I mean, it'd be useful, but let's try to get the range on there. This is all from the same ad. These next pieces, this next section, who we're looking for, 168 words, and I argue about 70 of those are meaningful skills. So we have fostering a positive safety and health culture. What skill would that be that you would use in analysis, and what skill would that be that you would use for a curriculum development? I don't know. And if we take this across 5 million ads, how does information like this aggregate upwards? Don't know, but we need to ask, right? So part of this process, here's an ad. This is a source of this wonderful skills information that we're using. The next, what you'll be doing, 184 words. The first part are tasks, and I wonder would they be mind to skills. The next is 39 words on qualifications with a split between the equivalence and the education. So we need to ask here is, would this be double counted? Would they pick one or the other? And it's kind of funny. This is Maryland, where they've had the state, somebody should take this to the governor, where you're not supposed to actually have a degree requirement, right? You're supposed to have an alternative to degree requirement. This has both. But that's an aside. And then there's preferred criterion, 125 words, actually fairly detailed. I wonder if they'd be picked up because they're not in a requirements or experience category. They would be good. So these are questions. I'm going to guess they can do a good job here. So, anyways, just to pull this to a close, these are a couple of the reports that we did, and I want to just be reinforced. These are old, and it's an embarrassment that this is the only pieces that, or some of the few pieces that I can point to of work done in this area to ask the questions that I'm trying to raise. I'm not saying it's a great report, it's old, right? But it starts opening the Pandora's box that we avoid looking at when it comes to ad, which accept this stuff whole cloth. And this is just another in that series. And in here, it kind of does a little bit of work that gets into what I was trying to do through a job ad. So, if you're interested, worth taking a look, but just please, hold on to the fact that it's old. So here's the one piece of information I think is really interesting that gives me hope that the job ads have a true signal underneath the noise. Is we did a comparison of ads to JOLTS, job openings, layovers, and turnover survey, and they move together. There's a lag between job ads and the JOLTS data, but they move together. So they're telling us there's something there. And so this is what gives me hope and why I've been a proponent of job ads since day one. But we need to figure out what's the noise factor, and we haven't. And we need to. This is somebody's dissertation from Harvard. This is probably one of their papers where they actually had the ability, they got the opportunity
Very hard
to
to hear last night on Zoom.
somebody, yeah, thank you. So they got hold of restricted use JOLTS data and compared it to job openings, found that less than 50% of the ads that were being posted, and this has actually come up in some other work. So we have to ask the question about how representative are job ads putting aside the rest of this, when we first started doing work with job ads, my answer to this was just be honest about what it is internet job ads are representative of what jobs on the internet. They're not representative of all jobs. So I think it's just changing our language will make it a little bit more accurate, right? And I have this paper, or you can find it. Here's another piece I was found that was on some neat analytics being done to try to use skills found in job ads to develop competency frameworks for data science. This is fairly new, very kind of interesting stuff here. And the only flaw is they assume that the parsing's perfect. Right? They never ask if the data itself should be questioned, right? But it's a very interesting method. So those of you who are more cutting edge than I am on this, definitely worth taking a look at this work. So then just to close, softball pitch to my fellow presenters. How in the heck do we wade through all this stuff to know if the sausage is safe to eat? So on that note, and Kyle, we can share these, of course, with people. So we'll, I guess, save questions to once everyone is done, correct, Kyle?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So, so next up we've got Paul. Paul, I think you can go ahead and start present on your end.
Perfect. You all should be seeing my the correct screen here. So for the sake of time, I'm going to move relatively quickly, but always happy to answer questions. And as Jeff said, make these slides available to everybody after today. So I'm going to take a lot of the context that we just heard about, some of the challenges around working with job postings, considerations you need to have. Use that context to explain what the National Labor Exchange Research Hub is, what we do, and how we try to address a lot of those challenges head on. So some of the challenges up here, I'm not going to spend too much time here because we did just hear about a lot of the challenges in working with job postings as a data source. Um, a couple that I want to call out that we hadn't heard yet. Right at the bottom, maturing data sources may not reflect labor market shifts. So job postings and the job feeds that they come from, this is a living, breathing source of data. New employers are coming and going all the time. Hiring and recruitment practices change all of the time. So you can see fluctuations in the data that may not be fully representative of actual labor market shifts. Inference versus extraction. I put something in the chat, Jeff. You know, there's a lot of great information about job postings. That's a lot about a lot of what I'm going to be talking about. It can be difficult to get at that accurately. Not impossible, but very, very difficult. Certainly keeps me up at night. All of this comes down to how you get at this information. And what we're really trying to do, and what I think is at the heart, Jeff, of some of what you were talking about, you can get clean information from job postings. That's actually relatively easy. But getting it to be reliable and unlocking this black box of clean data that usually exists is really what we at the Research Hub are focused on trying to do. So to give you all kind of an example you can touch, this is job posting as a data source. If you access the NLX Research Hub, this is what you are going to see. This is that raw, untouched job posting data. Up at the top, you see the fields that you would expect to find: occupational codes, titles, descriptions, employers, locations, all of that great information. At the bottom, you have a lot of the meat that people are really trying to get at: salary information, required education, experience, certifications, that sort of information. And you'll see a lot of NAs and just blank fields. All of that information exists much more than you would think looking at the data, but it exists in that unstructured job description that we heard examples of. So this is what we are trying to get to to really unlock that full potential of job postings. As they become more structured and the data can be standardized, analysts, solution developers can really access this underlying power of job postings as a data source. And once we do that, the question is, well, is it worth the effort? Personally, and this may just be to keep myself in a job, I think the answer is yes. On the screen, you'll see an overview of really some of the key bits of information that job postings can provide us. Occupational insights to build career pathways. Some of the conversations that were happening as this webinar was beginning, we talked about job titles and data evangelist. And is that in the SOC? There's a lot of standards when it comes to occupations, but those standards are national and slow moving. What job postings can do is tell us more about what occupations look like in real time as they are evolving. Usually, you're going to see a job title become more and more prevalent before you see a standardized occupation associated with it. So we're able to see those trends in real time and also see where we're going and get ahead of the future of work that we are always trying to do to better connect talent and opportunity. Skill and education demand, creating more informed curriculum based on actual demand and where that demand is going. And of course, localized insights to inform policy decisions. There is a lot of potential for messiness when it comes to the geographic specificity in a job posting, but in general, it will give you those sub-state insights that job opening estimates just aren't capable of producing. So as we address the challenges that we've been talking about and understanding some of the potential that lies within job postings, that is why we began the National Labor Exchange Research Hub. So the NLX Research Hub was started back in 2021 is when we really started providing data. And really what we are trying to do is build a data community that can provide and use comprehensive job postings data to compile actionable evidence across the workforce and education system. All that to say, we are trying to make this data more reliable and more accessible for the people that need it. Now, this could be people working directly with the data or people that are looking for those high-level insights about what the markets are doing. So job postings are theoretically a public resource. I say theoretically because there's a little bit of debate when it comes to employers on, well, yes, my job posting is publicly available. Dissecting it historically and looking at trends over time, that's not something that's generally provided publicly. It can be labor intensive and imprecise to aggregate all of that information and provide it to folks. A lot of the people that do that do a very good job, but it often comes with several challenges like costly licenses and lack of transparent data sourcing and methodologies to clean the data, which is really where we see the Research Hub having a lot of value for folks. So we are the only source of historical National Labor Exchange job postings. We also provide the real-time data, so we have both historical and real-time job posting information. I'm not going to spend too much time detailing the full value proposition, but what I really want to address here is transparency and accessibility. That is underpinning everything that we do at the Research Hub and everything that we try to instill in our users to maintain as well. And I'm going to spend a little bit more time now talking about this idea of accessibility and transparency, and it all starts with how we collect the data, which is one of the more unique things about the NLX Research Hub compared to other sources of job posting information. So for anybody that's not familiar with the National Labor Exchange, which began in 2007, it's a public-private partnership between the National Association of State Workforce Agencies, where the Research Hub is located, and the Direct Employers Association, which is a membership association of employers spanning geographies, industries, size, primarily focused on HR and recruitment efforts and support they can provide the employer community. And how this job feed works is that every 24 hours, we receive jobs from every state and territory's labor exchange system. So all those manually entered positions, um, directly from direct employers members and additional employers, either through their applicant tracking system or directly to the company's website. And through an agreement, we receive the jobs from usajobs.gov, which gives us great coverage of federal contractors and federal opportunities that other aggregators tend to miss. What's really key here is that all of these are original sources of job postings data. So when it comes to issues like fraud and duplicates, I'm never allowed to say we're 100% void of all of that, but we do very well at minimizing both of those right at the point of data collection. And it makes keeping up with it down the line a lot more manageable. So every 24 hours, this is packaged up and sent out back to at no additional cost. Every state and territory's job banks give them that full feed. We have a syndication network of partners like LinkedIn, Career One Stop, apprenticeship.gov to get these jobs in front of as many people as possible and really focusing on those underserved populations. And lastly, but certainly most importantly, to the National Labor Exchange Research Hub, all of these jobs go to as well. This is what we do with it at the Research Hub. I promise I'm not going to detail it. I show this for two reasons. One, it took a lot of time and effort to understand this, and I want to brag about it. And two, to again highlight the transparency. What we do with the job postings from the moment it is published online to the moment somebody touches it from us, we are very transparent on everything that happens in the process. If you are curious about some of these technical details, please let me know. Again, it took a lot of time to learn it, so I'm always happy to tell people about it. This is a much more simplified version. Basically, we are taking this job feed and then we are structuring it and sometimes aggregating it to make it accessible for folks in the ways that are going to meet their needs. So this is just a menu of our current offerings. We do have a daily API. You can access both historical and up-to-date job postings through our API. We aggregate monthly files of those raw job postings available on SFTP server for folks who prefer that form of access, maybe need a larger amount of the job postings. Our JPS package, job posting structure package, is an open GitHub repository. I'll talk a little bit more about that. We are undertaking our own efforts to structure this data and extract information from the job postings. If anybody is interested, we are going to start reaching out to folks to provide feedback on that accuracy and the format of structuring this data. I put it on here because, again, Jeff, to your point, how we get at this information, how accurate we are, is very important. So we want to be really transparent and make that available to anybody who wants to use this information. You can take our methodologies and adjust them to meet your needs. You can accept them as is. You can say, actually, looking at this, I don't like what you've done. Create your own path forward. All of that is acceptable. The spotlights and blog are our insights and analytics that we produce in-house. Our very talented economist, Marissa Hashizume, I believe, is on the call today. This is information. What is this data telling us? She recently completed a spotlight series on Fortune 500 companies, looking at the makeup of those opportunities, looking at how long jobs are available and what that can tell us, and some of the implications when you're working with job seekers and what they need to know about job availability. And what's been really exciting for folks is a deep dive into the pay transparency of these job postings. The Research Hub On-Demand dashboard and the NLX Job Opening Estimator are two of the data tools that we offer. These are free and available on the Research Hub website. I'll put that link in the chat here momentarily. The On-Demand dashboard It's an interactive dashboard letting you explore high-level trends that the data is telling us. The NLX Job Opening Estimator is really exciting in our newest offering that is looking at the relationship between job openings and National Labor Exchange job postings. So we not only provide easy to follow charts that you can look at the nation, region, and state level currently, show you how the NLX job posting data moves in comparison to JOLT's job opening estimates. We also produce our own job opening estimates based on the relationship between the NLX data and JOLT's job opening estimates and those two figures as well. That methodology, again, sake of transparency, was developed alongside a lot of the state workforce agencies and the JOLTS team at BLS to make sure this methodology would hold water and kind of adhere to their standards. Moving really quickly, none of this is possible without our community of users. So I always say that we build with and for our users. This is just an example of who those different audiences are that we are working with. This is state workforce agency, LMI shops, federal agencies, local workforce boards, nonprofit researchers, academic institutions, nonprofit and for-profit solution developers, everybody that has a stake in the workforce and education system is who we are building this community with and for. Traditionally, we've provided access to nonprofits and governments really doing discrete research projects. We are working on opening up access to this. I'll talk a little bit more about this this quarter. So by the end of March 2026, opening up access to even more users for even more applications of this data. We just want to make sure that we do it smart and really want to make sure that this information and data is as much of a public good as we can possibly make it. Here is an example of just 3 projects I like to highlight. Actually, I often talk about Pete Norlander and the Job Ad Analysis Toolkit, but since he's going to do a much better job of that himself, I took that off of this slide. Won't spend too much time here, just in the interest of allowing plenty of time for Pete and questions. But what I want to point out is that people are actively working with this data to better understand what it can tell us about the demand for labor. So top left, the Oregon Talent Assessment, SRI International is a research group. It's really one of the first users we had, and they've used us for a lot of projects. An example of what they were able to do, examine the requirements in certified nursing assistant occupations and postings versus registered nurses, and try to understand what would be involved in that career progression from CNA to an RN. Top right, from the RAND Corporation, they were contracted by the Department of the Air Force to look at Department of Air Force job opportunities and how that information is communicated versus similar positions in the public sector, and see where the demand was different and if it was an effective approach for the Air Force to begin tapping into more of that civilian labor force based on the skills that are being developed and actively sought for in the public sector. Bottom left, always happy when people are on the call. Adam Leonard and Kyle, the team from George Washington, and the Laser Project, we're looking at identifying skills and technologies needed. This was focused specifically on looking at data science jobs in Texas. What is being demanded of this and how has this changed over time? And it's just such a great visual representation where data scientists are always sought after. It's a fast-growing occupation. I don't think anybody anticipates that stopping. But that doesn't tell you much other than we still need data scientists. What's really important is if you want to be a successful data scientist in the state of Texas, you can see how what it takes to be successful is changing. You're seeing the demand for things like cloud computing really increasing. Traditional abilities, SAS as a skill used to be over 50% of job postings were specifically requesting that. You see by 2023, that drops below 20%. So the position is still in need, but what is actually the skill being sought for, what it takes to be successful, that is where you're seeing a lot of the change. So I will skip over this for the sake of time and just say, there we go. Here is a QR code to the Research Hub website for more information. Different ways you can get involved, plenty of emails that I'll put in the chat. The key point is if you're curious, reach out, get access to the data, and explore for yourselves. So, thank you very much.
I didn't mean to take myself off mute as kind of a way of kind of starting to play the music to count you down, but we do want to make sure we get through everything and have take a couple questions before the hour is up. So Peter Norlander, Peter, please go ahead.
Thank you. And I'm Pete Norlander from Loyola University of Chicago. It's a pleasure to be here. I stand on the shoulder of giants, so I may go quickly through my slides. This work that I'm presenting is based on a paper that is jointly done with Stephen Meisenbacher and with Svetlozar Nestorov. I recommend that if you have difficulty sleeping or are interested, very interested in knowing the precision and the recall of every one of the tools that we've built and how we built it, you can access our working paper online and just read about all of that. Sorry, the work has been generously supported by the Russell Sage Foundation, the Washington Center for Equitable Growth, and of course, data access through the National Labor Exchange. But those organizations bear no responsibility for what I'm about to say. I'm an independent researcher and I speak only for myself. I also have to acknowledge and thank many people at Loyola who supported this work in terms of computing resources and other parts. I see the opportunities of job postings as enormous. I think there's no wasted text in there if we wanted to mine it for the purpose of understanding company culture or management practices or change in those over time. Looking at the potential rich nature of data and as a data source, I think it's incredibly useful for many research projects. I've written 2 papers with job postings data that have been published in peer-reviewed journals, and I'm currently working on a number. It's been my post-tenure long-term career project or interest in extracting granular concepts at scale from document corpora. So I think of all of the job postings in the US as potentially the universe I'd love to be able to access. And it's really wonderful that the National Labor Exchange, for the last 3 years I've been working with them, has 46% of the job openings in the United States since 2022. And that's a number from the NLX Joe app, and it's correlated 0.93 with the JOLTS job openings data. Now, the limitations of job ads as data sources, highlighted especially in the National Academy of Sciences report, include the access restrictions and the difficulty of accessing the data, and the fact that you don't get standard data out of it, and you have multiple taxonomies, different ways of construing the data. But I want to say that both of these, and a third issue raised by the technical reports that Jeff mentioned, as well, I'd really like to point out the Lancaster, Mahoney, Nair, and Ratcliffe report compares 2 data sets, and including the NLX data set. And what I would say about the limitations are that they're solvable. We're solving them, and they will be solved because the immense opportunity and the value that can be created from having access to the intelligence and information from these job postings at scale is real. So the contribution in our paper is really twofold. First, we make a open source toolkit to analyze job postings and extract information. No knock on any provider of job ad data, but as an independent researcher, I would want to know what tool or how is metadata being created about a job posting. And so that's why we created an open source toolkit. So anybody can see, you try the tools yourself, see how they work on your data for your use case. If you don't like them, do something else. If you like them, you can use them for free. And then the second part of our work was once we extract information from job postings to try to see what we could do with it for research by aggregating the data at national and occupational and industry levels. So the use cases for that really include more than just research. It could be workforce development and career interest mapping or education planning, and perhaps statistical products could be improved and synthetic data from job ads on. We don't really have great statistics today on change within occupations in terms of skills or tasks. So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, if pursued. We will someday see something, I hope. Let me show you what the job ad analysis toolkit is. And each of our tools here, has a different color, but to the top left, this is a Loyola Medicine job ad. CT Technologist Nights, that's the title. We get our occupation coding from the title. That's the occupational code we get. That's the confidence level we have in it. The features in job titles are sometimes extracted as well. This is an overnight job. We extract firm names. So if metadata doesn't contain a firm name, that's not a problem in NLX post 2022. But in earlier periods, about all job postings data are missing like 40% of the firm names. So we extract a lot of them with our tool that is a special named entity recognition tool. We get the tasks. These are ONET task IDs. And you can see here where we're pulling them from. We get skills, and those are European skills classification codes. So we have independent measures, independent models pulling this information out. They're fine-tuned and domain-specific, meaning we really paid attention. We built two-stage models to ensure that we're extracting the information about the tasks that the worker will do, not what the firm does. So if it's a lawn care company and the job is in accounting, it's only pulling the stuff from the accounting part. The wages can be extracted. We also get a number of bespoke features. And that's what our toolkit does. It's on GitHub. You can install it. If you're a technologist, you can work with it. I did, while we were having our conversation, look up data evangelist and how does it code that? It codes it to data scientist. I was very pleased with that result. And what we can do once we have this data out at a scale where you can look at a picture of the nation or industry or occupation. So on the top left, nationally, there was a huge surge, it appears, in recruiting and scheduling tasks within job ads during periods of tight labor markets before the pandemic and after the pandemic. It looks like also that state pay transparency laws significantly increased the percent of job ads that have wages posted. On the bottom left, the readability of job ads decreased during the post-pandemic period, likely because of a change in the nature of what jobs are being posted during the pandemic. And then it got a lot easier to read job postings after November 2022, which, if you remember, is when ChatGPT started coming out. And they got easier to read in the information sector quicker than they did nationally or in sectors like education, health, and public administration. Now, on the bottom right, just tracking some technical terms around AI like machine learning and neural networks and artificial intelligence terms and databases, very similar to what we saw in the analysis of the Texas data. So this data can be aggregated and perhaps be useful. I think especially useful would be if statistical agencies are involved and can help correctly weight the data so that it may be more representative or speak to what is happening economy-wide or within a particular region. Our efforts to measure our accuracy include assessments of both the precision and the recall. So precision is if we call it something, how many times are we accurate when we call it that thing? The recall is how many of the relevant items are actually being retrieved. And our emphasis in our first go around while we were doing this was really high precision. We want to be accurate when we're calling something task ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We want to be accurate 90% or more of the time was our goal. So we built with humans in the loop, meaning myself and some RAs. We would code and label the data ourselves and make sure that it was accurate. When we got all of our data out, we ran a number of tests on each of our models to make sure that the data can be confirmed by independent sources. And I'll give you some examples. We also use large language models as a judge. We took sentences from the Career One Stop corpus 20,000 random sentences, and we ran them through three different language models, and we got them to vote on whether we accurately labeled a skill, and then did we label the skill the correct skill? And I'll show you some data. So title matching, for example. At the 6-digit level, weighted by the frequency of job titles, we're about 67% accurate. At the 2-digit SOC level, we're about 86%. Okay? And this is using Department of Labor data from the Labor Condition Application Program, where about 661 of the 867 SOC titles are in there. This picture just gives you an overall presentation of what we're doing with LLMs as a judge. And it's a simulation of essentially when you embed, and we're using embeddings and transformer models here to do similarity searching between the known items in a taxonomy and the sentences in a job ad. When we get the similarity score back, we kept everything at 0.87 or above, which meant that on this top line here, this dash line, we had a precision of 90%. What that also means is that our recall was down here around 50%, meaning we're throwing out a lot of really good data. We could have actually tuned down our dial a little bit and had a balanced F1 score really around 80%. But we emphasized precision over recall, and we filled up our hard drive. So, we had to do something, we had to really choose what data we wanted to keep. The point here also is that this can be solved and improved. So we know that the existing taxonomy may not contain every skill or task or whatever else technology, and those things are going to change over time. So we've been thinking and working on how can we build things to mine text for emerging skills, tasks, tools, technologies, and so on. The limitations of our work are that it's based on existing open source embedding and natural language processing models. The good news is that computer science modeling and these technologies are getting better. And even when we started 3 years ago, the tools we used then versus what we do now, we're getting better results with the same training data. We can add coverage of more features. We can improve our recall. We can basically identify emerging things and crosswalk to other taxonomies. And we can look at other corpora and then think about how could resumes or syllabi and other data sources be linked to improve the use cases for research and other applications. So you want to check things yourself, always do. I just want to show you, I took Jeff's before, and I can share this too, but I also have a notebook here, and this is where I did my data evangelist test. You can download these tools in a second and run it on a free tool and check it out yourself. And that's pretty much my presentation.
Thank you, Peter. We've this has been just an incredible webinar where we've got a lot of different perspectives. I've definitely learned a lot more about how the sausage is made, and I think we've kind of come full circle. I certainly have, from Jeff being a little bit I don't want to say pessimistic, but pointing out, being realistic and to maybe having a little bit more confidence. And I say that I'm biased, of course. I lead a research team, full disclosure, that is building a tool for the extraction of skills from text documents such as job postings. In terms of the chat has been a little bit more quiet actually than I expected, but Tom, you raised a point about kind of who's who's keeping who is A grading job postings and who's writing them. Do you want to say a little bit more about your question in the chat, Tom Wecko? If you do want to come off mute.
If I had more to say, I would say it.
You're pretty muffled, by the way.
Oh, sorry. Is that any better? If I had anything more useful to say, I would say it.
I'm still not hearing you. I see Jeff doing the motions. I think it's not just maybe I guess I can actually invite our panelists just go ahead and react to what you put in the chat, which was whose responsibility is it to document job postings data? And maybe that can also be, maybe a spin on that question could also be whose responsibility is it to validate and verify? This is certainly something that we're thinking about in our own research.
I'll just speak in. I just love what they presented, and it gets really answering some of the questions that I was raising. There's actually some reliability statistics there.
Mm, yeah.
That was half what I was looking for. So that's great.
My thought is it's on a user to, at this point, validate until we have trusted verification and other methods. Test the tools and check the row level results of any product you're looking at and evaluating and do the comparison Jeff was talking about. Here's the text. What's the metadata? Look at 100 examples. If you feel comfortable, use it. If you don't, look for something else.
So another question that's been on my mind is this question of we talked a little bit about vendors, we danced around it, we didn't really mention vendors by name in this presentation, and maybe that was intentional on the part of the presenters. Um, but there is this real risk, I think, for organizations that you do get locked into using data from a particular source. And does that have consequences? Is there a way that we can I guess I'm kind of wondering if I'd invite our panelists to react to this question of, is this a risk that I should be giving organizations second thoughts about using job ads as a source of data, especially if we start thinking about using job ads for the computation of statistics that we might wish to compare on a longitudinal basis, being dependent on particular vendors? Um, is the NLS Research Hub is that the antidote to being coming becoming addicted to a particular vendor? And I guess yeah, would invite perspectives, and other members of the audience can speak to this too if this has been a hesitation on the part of using job postings as data, or if people have thought through ways to avoid vendor lock-in.
Yeah, so I can quickly speak from the perspective of the research hub and a data provider. Um, Vendor lock-in is awful. It's painful. The rug can be taken out from under you at a moment's notice. Putting all your eggs in one basket always has issues. I will say other job uh, posting providers, they can be really expensive. There's also a reason they're really expensive. We just spent almost an hour talking about how hard this data is to work with and all the considerations. Um, from our perspective, we view ourselves as a supplement. Can we be the complete answer? I hope so. That's certainly what we're going for, but we don't view us and what we provide as if you are using another provider, throw it out and just use us instead. Every provider is going to have strengths and weaknesses that you need to take into consideration and understand. There's differences in representativeness and coverage. We speak with a lot of the other providers, and there is shared understanding that everybody has a role to play in this. Um, so that's kind of top level for me. We certainly designed the research hub in large part to maybe not be the full antidote by ourselves, but get in that direction. The National Labor Exchange, NASWA, our members are employers and state workforce agencies, actual members of these organizations. Job postings, if nothing else, belong to those two groups. We have a bit of an issue when people take their information and sell it back to them. So that is certainly part of what we're trying to do in this overarching idea of the public good aspect of job postings, but certainly don't take our word for it. Um, but yeah, that would be my initial reaction.
And Dawn in the chat mentioned the name of a vendor that we were avoiding avoiding mentioning, but yes, it definitely I'll say it, Lightcast is definitely one that people are thinking about. It's one that I've seen a number of researchers, members of the NCRN using, and actually, just for reference, people can actually find a sample of Lightcast data on Snowflake, which is a kind of a marketplace for social science data sources. So it is possible actually to take a look at the sausage directly if you'd like to inspect the factory yourself.
Yeah, I'd
Um,
like to just show it very quickly. I'd hope that the market will move towards transparency. So what Peter walked through gives some of the answers to questions. There's low reliability, but there's reliability. What do we do with that? And at least you're presenting it. So I was very happy to see that.
yeah.
And maybe the more the consumer base asks the questions, the vendors and providers will give that information. Because that's all I want to see, right? Is if you're going to cross a bridge, you want to know the bridge isn't going to fall down under you, right? Want to know it's
Well,
reliable.
yeah. And there was a little bit of a question. Donald Staub, I'm guessing you might be asking about Turkey since that's where you're based. Definitely, I think what my temptation to answer you would be there's a lot of open source innovation going on right now that's largely using US data. Certainly for the laser project at George Washington, we're currently only using US data. In theory, the message should be exportable. But that's an empirical research question for the NCRN community to kind of collectively address, I think, is to try to, export some of these tools and see if we can find comparable results in other markets where there might be a less centralized approach to collecting job ads.
Well, just
Given that
very
we
quickly on that, Kyle, Burning Glass cut their teeth in the international market, so they might
they
have some
definitely have,
insight there. And then secondly, the EU has done a bunch of work on job ads in labor mobility in the EU. And I have a CD from a conference about 2013 or 14 that I can try to dig up to
yeah.
share if
No,
anybody
they
wants
and
it.
we had a meeting with the European Commission in October, and they mentioned that that work is definitely still ongoing. Um, but again, do you see the same percentage of jobs actually being posted formally, being advertised in other parts of the world? Hard to know, right? So we are at 104, so I think it's probably about time to wrap up the webinar, but I'm sure that our presenters would be happy to take questions over email and hopefully see everybody again. I think at our next NCRN webinar, which will be in mid-February, we'll be announcing details on that to the mailing list very soon. Thank you all.